Hey, everybody, how are y'all doing? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and Google this and I will share this with y'all. This is a little sheet that I made to help students review for the age of exploration. This is an important topic and something that, tends to kind of, it's one of those things. It's not like the most, the most accessible topic sometimes. It's a little boring dealing with trade and stuff like that, but it's something that I think is very important to know. This one. All right. So the age of exploration, need to know. Now, I've created a couple of these handouts. I plan to make some more of them, but really what I sought to do, and it's got a blank one here in case your teacher ever wants to use it in class or something. But what I'm doing here is trying to put things that you need to know all in one place, okay, and in one page, and kind of give you a synopsis of it. So first of all, what was the age of exploration? It's an expansion of trade into Asia. Of course, this was the initial goal, right, was to go into Asia and trade for silks and spices, and also of colonization of the Americas. When did this happen? The early modern period, 15th to 18th century. So really, it's a pretty long phenomenon lasting from about 1450 to 1800, with it really kind of peaking in the 16th century, the 1500s. Now, where did this happen? It happened first in Spain and Portugal, now followed by others. I need to be a little bit more clear on that. Now, the countries that are following are Britain, France, and the Netherlands. All right. So it's really going to be, by the time this thing's over, Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and the Netherlands. And so these countries are all going to be involved in this. Now, who? Now, remember, there really isn't much reason for any kind of historical phenomenon to have to know more than two or three people. Now, there's one name on here. I'm pretty sure that Ferdinand Magellan is in your concept outline, so you might want to know who he is. He's the guy that circumnavigated the world, or at least his crew did, because Magellan himself was killed fighting in the Philippines. So Prince Henry the Navigator, who was in Portugal. Now, why was Prince Henry the Navigator famous? Now, remember, another thing is I can even have people that talk to me on here, so I want to try that out sometime. So Prince Henry the Navigator from Portugal, he founded a school of navigation and supported. He was really kind of a patron. What Lorenzo de Medici was to Renaissance art, Prince Henry the Navigator was to the age of exploration, really making sure. Now, he never personally went on a voyage. He wasn't a sailor or anything like that himself, but he was somebody who helped. Okay, so kind of like Lorenzo de Medici patronized these artists. And so then there's Vasco da Gama, who was the first Portuguese explorer to reach India. And then, of course, Christopher Columbus, who was an explorer. Now, Christopher Columbus was an explorer for Spain, but he was, actually born in Italy. Well, this makes sense. Why would the Spanish hire an Italian? Because the Italians were the ones who controlled trade in the late Middle Ages. Now, this is where everything kind of connects, because in the late Middle Ages, the Italians controlled trade. Well, where is the Renaissance starting? Well, the Renaissance is starting in Italy, and it's starting in Italy because of this trade that is being controlled over there in Italy. So when we look at the medieval trade routes, okay, the late medieval trade routes, I can't make this full screen and use this screen, so sorry about that. But the late medieval trade routes, everything is really based in the Mediterranean and is being controlled from Venice and Genoa. All right. So the Italians are controlling this trade. You see that there's some trade that's going out, into the sea and, into Northern Europe. But this is really the epicenter of trade. Now, the Silk Road, came in through Constantinople, is where the land route would come in. And Constantinople was really the gateway to Europe, from these Eastern goods getting to Europe. All right. So that's where the Italians picked them up and started to distribute them. Now, the thing is that if you are in Spain or Portugal or France or Britain or the Netherlands, you're having to pay a heavy premium for these exotic goods. And these exotic goods are both rare and expensive. That is before. Okay. So exotic goods such as spices and silks were expensive. Now, if you want to, you can use that link and you can come up, you can have this and you can write on it rather than just watching. So if you'd like to do that, that would be fine. All right. So as far as that goes, exotic goods were expensive. Now, spices and silks, they both start with S, okay? Spices and silks. And so the land route had been dominated by the Byzantines in the Middle Ages. And then in 1453, the fall of Constantinople. Now, we know of the fall of Constantinople because of, we know the fall of Constantinople, had an effect on the Renaissance because the Greek scholars, then when their universities were closed by the Turks, they came over to Italy, and the Italians were like, you know what, we would love for you to translate some of this stuff into Latin. So they translated Plato into Latin. People had read Aristotle in the Middle Ages, but not so much Plato. And so in 1453, the fall of Constantinople is a turning point because from that point on, the Mediterranean trade is dominated by the Ottomans, the land route. And then the Mediterranean trade was dominated by the Italians. And so that's resulting in a massive markup for Western Europeans. Now, Spain and Portugal, how do they get around and cut out it looked like out when I was looking here, but cut out the middleman. Okay, if it looks like out, it's not a typo. Up here, it's clear. Cut out the middleman. All right, so how are they going to do that and get around this massive markup? Now, one thing here, I've got 4 different technologies listed here, which I think are important. You don't have to necessarily know all of them. You just need to know that there were new technologies that made this possible. So, for example, the Mercator projection. All right, this is a map that is specifically made for sailors. Now, remember that technology isn't just gadgets. Technology can also be a way of doing things. Okay, so if we were looking at a Mercator projection, this map, it's a weird looking map, but it's weird to us. Of course, every map's weird looking because you're taking a spherical globe and you're figuring out how am I going to project this. And so Gerardus Mercator figured out, this way of projecting the map is going to be best for sailors. And so this looks a little bit different than we're used to, but it's extremely useful if you are sailing across an ocean. And so they've got a different way of doing maps. Now, the magnetic compass had been invented before this, but not necessarily perfected. So at this time, now people can figure out which direction is north, which had been difficult before. And it's kind of hard to cross an ocean without knowing which direction you're going. A caravel, which is a type of ship. Columbus had 2 of them, the Nina and the Pinta, were caravels. The Santa Maria was a larger ship, but still a pretty new design. Now, also firearms. Once the Europeans got to the New World and got to India and to China, if they hadn't had firearms, then it would have been difficult for them to be dominant because there were less of them than you saw in they didn't bring large groups, so they had these superior weapons technologies. So understanding what's making this possible, that there are these new technologies that are coming out here. And then, why are they doing this? Okay, so when we look at the why, we see the how here, and then the why. God, glory, and gold, the 3 Gs. Now, the ordering does not necessarily go with priority. Of course, gold's most important, right? But we always like to put God first, just in case he's watching. And so, with God, spread Christianity in the Americas and Asia. Now, one thing that I would note here as a little caveat is that spreading Christianity was a lot more successful in the Americas than it was in Asia. Okay, so spreading Christianity, and I've seen that actually come up on a test question, on an exam question before. Christianity, if you think about today, like what is the dominant religion in Latin America and what is the dominant religion in India or China, then you'll see, okay, it was much more successful in the Americas than in Asia. And then glory, okay? Of course, people are doing this to get glory for themselves. So sailors and conquistadors, they are trying to discover new lands. They're trying to build empires. And then gold, okay? So European monarchs sought to gain wealth from finding gold and importing exotic goods, okay? Remember, exotic goods, primarily spices and silks, but other stuff as well. And as a result here. Okay, so these are the results of the age of exploration, the consequences. First of all, an increase in global trade and European dominance. Now, we're still at the beginning part of this course, and you might wonder, why is it that there is a course in AP European history? Now, there's also a course in AP World History and AP United States History, but there is not another AP course that focuses primarily on the history of one continent. And why does this course start around 1450? Well, if we look at the history of the world before 1450, you don't see Europe dominating any part of the world outside of Europe. You also, in the Middle Ages, you wouldn't go to Europe and think, wow, this place is so much more advanced than the society in India or the society in China. But at this time, we're starting to see that Europe is starting to be in a position where they are technologically dominant, and they are going, I mean, it's like really Europe has had an outsized amount of influence on the development of the modern world. The modern world has been very influenced by Europe, whereas before 1450, you wouldn't have seen as nearly as much of this. And then the Columbian Exchange. Now, the Columbian Exchange specifically describes the trade relationships that came out of the age of exploration. And so even though we could say that there was somebody that the Vikings got to the Americas before Columbus, maybe somebody discovered it. But as far as creating a meaningful trade relationship that is permanent, you're not going to see that in terms of anything before the Columbian Exchange. And so as far as this goes, we see that more available goods, and these available goods are cheaper. And so that's the thing, that before the age of exploration, exotic goods were very rare and very expensive. After the age of exploration, exotic goods are not rare and not expensive. So if I were to produce a jar of cinnamon, y'all wouldn't be like, whoa, because that's not something that we're thinking, all right, that's so expensive, because, we have access to this. Most of you, if you go into your kitchen cabinet, there is a shelf that has a bunch of spices on it. That is a consequence of the age of exploration. When somebody has food allergies and they can't even say what they're allergic to, you have to eliminate things because our diet is so varied. So that's another thing. There's more trade, there are more goods, those goods are cheaper, and we see ourselves going into this world where everything is much more plentiful, and we're eating foods from all over the world. Now, a concurrent movement, something going on at the same time that I think is important, is the development of the new monarchies. Okay, so the new monarchies, this is, and if y'all want me to go into that a little more detail, I can go into the new monarchies. So y'all just let me know. The chat's been kind of quiet. We've only had one question, so feel free to ask questions. Feel free to chat. I'm glad y'all are listening to me. I think that's great. But the new monarchies, okay, so we're seeing an increase in royal power and a corresponding decline in the power of the church and the nobility. Remember that when we start this course, the dominant, political and social system is feudalism. All right. So feudalism, which is, a system where there are kings, but there really aren't nations. Okay. So, it's like the King of France is technically the ruler of France, but doesn't really rule personally, doesn't collect his own taxes, only rules an area that's in his personal domain. And so we're starting to see that these new monarchs are starting to centralize administration. And so what we see here is that, Ferdinand and Isabella are the new monarchs of Spain. Well, they're the same people who sent Columbus. So this infusion of wealth that's coming in from this increased trade and coming in from the New World, this is something that is enabling these monarchs to consolidate and increase their power. So I'll talk about that in just a second. Let me see what we've got as far as our questions. Okay, so we've got a couple questions here. All right. Okay. Louis the 14th is a little bit early, Liam. Now, what I'm going to say about the new monarchies is that the new monarchies are not absolutist per se. Okay. So when you look at the new monarchies, you're not dealing with absolutism, but you're dealing with something that is kind of in the process of perhaps becoming absolutist. And so, we're really kind of setting the stage for Louis the 14th. But the new monarchs are consolidating a degree of power, but not quite to the extent that Louis the 14th is going to have in the in the next period of history. And so, how did the Northern Renaissance differ from the Italian Renaissance? Okay, so Brandon, I've got a whole video on this. Okay, so y'all be sure, go to my YouTube channel. I've got a video on the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance, and I think I talked about this a great deal last week. But basically, what they have in common, all right, what the Italian Renaissance and the Northern Renaissance have in common is that they're all humanist. Okay, so the Renaissance is focusing on these classical texts. So whether you're Petrarch, Pico, Valla, Castiglione, and Machiavelli on the Italian side, or if you're Thomas More or Erasmus, you're studying the classics, you're trying to glean wisdom from the classics. Okay, so those are as far as that, you're looking at the classics. Now, the Northern Renaissance, by comparison, now the Italian Renaissance is known for two qualities, individualism and secularism, which, again, it's not like it's totally individualistic, totally secular, but compared to the Middle Ages, which were dominated by religion, and that you were focused on your group and your place in society, the Italian Renaissance is starting to embrace secularism and individualism to a greater extent than what we see in the Northern Renaissance, where the Northern Renaissance is more concerned about social reform. Okay, so social reform and Christianity. So, for example, when you think about the praise of folly, okay, so Erasmus, when he's writing the praise of folly, he's criticizing the Catholic Church. So he's using a classical text. The Bible is a classical text. Remember, I like to say Greek, Roman, and biblical literature were the things that are studied by the humanists, because we want to remember that biblical literature is part of this classical literature. And so Erasmus says, well, all the bishops today are rich, but you see in the Bible that when the apostles were following Christ around, they were poor. And so if the bishops consider themselves successors of the apostles, then why are they wealthy? Why don't they become poor like the apostles? And so Erasmus is criticizing the church, but remember that Erasmus is doing it as a Catholic. Okay, he's not taking issue with Catholic doctrine. He's only taking issue with some of the church practices. So that's what separates Erasmus from Martin Luther later on, because Luther is going to question Catholic doctrine in addition to church practices. So, and then Thomas More in Utopia. Now, what I like to use to kind of illustrate this is, on one hand, Machiavelli and Castiglione, the civic humanist, where they are saying, like Machiavelli saying, here's how to be a successful ruler. Okay, here's how to be a successful prince. Whereas Castiglione, another Italian Renaissance civic humanist writer, is saying, here's how to become a courtier, a good courtier. Here's how to serve a king. And so with that, we see Machiavelli and Castiglione on one side, here's how to advance yourself. Whereas when Thomas More sits down to write, he writes Utopia, and it's like, let me imagine what the ideal society would be like. Now, Thomas More is grabbing his inspiration from Plato, who had written The Republic. And so, he is he's drawing upon the classics, just like Castiglione and Machiavelli are, just like Petrarch is, but it's a different thing that he's doing with it, that it is more about how can we envision the ideal society. And the Northern Renaissance art is also a little bit more like naturalistic, whereas the Italian Renaissance art is more idealized. So, I'm not really an expert on Northern Renaissance art, but that can happen as well, that when you look at, that it's more real. It's striving for more realism, even if it means portraying something as less than perfect. Whereas Renaissance art is much more about projecting this, this perfection, this kind of ideal. Now, of course, when you go into Mannerist art, which that's why you need to join the Fiveable Facebook group, go ahead and get a sneak peek at my lecture, at my new lecture on Mannerism before I release it to the public. So that is that's one of the options there. And let's see here. Okay, so we've got all right, Lucia there in Miami. I love Miami. I'm hoping to come in and do my annual review there again this time. And there is Brandon. Oh wait, Brandon Archimedean. Oh my goodness, Brandon, is Miss Marino your teacher? Let me know, please. Miss Marino is my favorite. Okay, so yes. Thank you so much. So definitely, y'all. Yeah, definitely. Get in there. Joseph, you still got to answer the questions. I haven't seen yet. So make sure, let us know where you go to school and your email address, and then you're in. But remember, the Fiveable Facebook group. Okay, so some of y'all are Miss Marino students. Okay, she's everyone. Wait, really? Is this? It's just like me and Miss Marino's bunch. Okay, all right. Well, yeah. Well, then we all agree on that. Okay, so that's great. Okay, I love her so much too. So that's that. Okay, so y'all are still studying the Renaissance. That's why we've got so many people doing that. Okay, well, awesome. Okay, well, good. Y'all are MVP people. All right. So as far as that goes. Let's see. Let's go ahead and take a look at our questions coming up. Okay, excellent. So the thing is, I've got that video. I've got a video, first of all, dedicated to the Northern Renaissance, and then another one comparing the Italian and the Northern Renaissance. Okay, so as far as that goes, Andres, I don't know what we're talking about here. I tell you what, why don't we invite him on screen? Let's see if he wants to join us. I invited him. So far, nobody's taken me up on offers to come on screen. All right. Possibly, Liam, that could be something, that Northern Renaissance art does have a little bit more of a Gothic look to it. I think that that's reasonable. Whereas, see, that's the thing, that the Italian Renaissance is, looking to borrow directly from that classical style. So, I think that's fair. It's kind of specific, but I think that's a fair thing to ask there. All right, so let's see. Nobody's coming on screen. Okay, so yeah, that's just kind of a vague. That's kind of a vague question. All right, so the new monarchies. Okay, now I will tell you that I am not much of an expert on France. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a look here. I need to polish this lecture up. I've got a little bit left to do on it, but I'll go ahead and, one of these days I'll have this on YouTube. So, let's go ahead and just take a look at it and kind of look at what's going on. So, as far as English and French and all of that kind of stuff. Now, again, I'm really not an expert on France at this period. So the new monarchies, okay, so 15th century, this is in the 1400s that we start to see this happening. And so remember that feudalism was the status quo. This is what was there already. Now, medieval monarchs constantly had to answer to powerful nobles and a powerful Catholic Church. So the goals of the new monarch were to centralize the state, unify the people, and increase royal power, because feudalism, it's really almost like the country was like a quilt or something like that, okay? That it's just really more of a patchwork. And so the new monarchs are the first ones that are really trying to subdue the nobility, increase royal power, and centralize the state, especially in terms of tax collection and the like. Now, the goals of the new monarchs. Okay, so to weaken or subordinate rivals. Okay, so the nobility, the church, whatever we can do to get those people to where we're not answering that to them anymore. And so laying the foundation. Oh, did somebody come? Oh my goodness, somebody's here. All right, so let's see what somebody joined us. All right, let's see. We'll go ahead and stop sharing and see what happens there. Okay. Somebody come in. All right.
Oh, hello, Mr. Tom Ritchie.
Hey, all right. Introduce yourself.
My name is Andres, and I have a question about how styles changed throughout the Renaissance.
Okay, so what styles are we talking about?
So we had recently a DBQ with Miss Marino that says analyze the values and purposes of Renaissance education and the extent to which these values and
Uh,
purposes were transformed and challenged over time.
that had the sound of one of those things. I was like, this sounds like somebody's trying to get me to do their homework for them, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, now remember that that question is specifically for a DBQ, and I'm actually going to be giving that DBQ later this
Oh,
week.
okay.
And I like that DBQ, okay? But remember that a DBQ question is, it's very specific. And this one, it's like kind of because what's happening here is that Renaissance education, all right? So Renaissance education is essentially an education in the classics. So if I want to receive an education on the model of the Renaissance, the humanist model, I need to be learning history, philosophy, Latin, literature. I need to be basically becoming well read, and I need to be learning about the experience of humanity. Now, the problem is, okay, and I actually, if anybody wants to, if y'all listen to podcasts, I've got a podcast. Just look up my name on iTunes or Google Play, the Tom Ritchie podcast. And last week I was talking about how Mark Zuckerberg actually idolizes Augustus Caesar. And it's kind of interesting because here is one of the biggest tech entrepreneurs in the world. And it's like, sure, the technology education he received was beneficial, but he was also studying ancient Rome. And I think that there's something to be said for this humanist model of education that, that you are studying the ancient Romans because these are the people who, according to Renaissance humanists, they stood at the pinnacle of greatness. And so the problem, though, is on one hand, the classical education model I think is great. Like, I want my daughter to learn Latin. I want my daughter to study the history of Rome in great detail. But the thing is that for most people, it's not relevant, okay? Unless you seek to be a leader in society, then there's not a whole lot there for you except for your own enjoyment. And so that's when you look at that DBQ, you kind of saw what people were complaining about, that it's like, okay, this model of education is making people into good leaders. And so everybody starts trying to go after that model of education. And they're realizing that, this is really not for everybody. So there are some things there that are kind of, they're seeing that it is of limited use for certain professions. But I still think that today, and you're lucky to have a teacher like Miss Marino who is passionate about this stuff and is teaching you about these things, because you're learning things in this class. I think that AP Euro is the class where you're going to learn a lot. Like, you're going to answer more Jeopardy questions from what you're learning in AP Euro. I mean, it's just, this class gives you culture. Okay. I mean, it's just more than any other class that you'll ever take. So yeah, but remember, yeah, that's something there that's kind of, now one thing you'll want to note too is my lecture on Mannerism that's available in the Facebook group. That is actually, an example of how something changed in the late Renaissance. So we start to see art change. So Mannerism, for example, the Renaissance, the high Renaissance art style is basically like total perfection, symmetry, and everything is supposed to be portrayed as ideal. And so Mannerism, it's like, well, you know what? This is not so ideal anymore. It's like in the late Renaissance, after Charles V's troops just demolished Rome, this idea that everything's just really nice and flowery just isn't holding a lot of water anymore. So, definitely, but the thing is that on a DBQ, those documents are, they're steered to get you to answer a particular question. based on, using those documents to come to an answer. So that sort of thing isn't necessarily something that's going to come up on an exam as a multiple choice question, but, you use those documents in order to figure out how are these things changing, and also from country to country to a certain extent. That was something that you can see that the English sources look a little different than the Italian sources, so on and so forth. All right. Well, thank you, Andres, for joining. You have anything else for me?
No, that's it. Thank you for your
All
time.
right. Thank you. All right, and we've got a few things here. All right, so as far as that, all right. So let me go ahead, and we're continuing to answer Liam's question here, and just kind of getting into the new monarchs. All right. So as far as that goes, we're laying the foundation for Louis XIV. And I'm sorry I can't full screen on this screen because it'll go onto the screen I'm not sharing. So as far as that goes, England, France, and Spain. All right. So England, Henry VIII. All right, is the monarch there. Now in France, I'm not sure exactly which one. I need to finish this, do a little more researching. But Henry VIII, not Henry VIII, Henry VII. Okay. So Henry VIII was Henry VII's son, but Henry VII was the monarch who fought the War of the Roses. Now, before Henry VII, you had all of these dynastic wars. The War of the Roses wasn't the first civil war that was fought in England at that time. And so Henry VII won the War of the Roses and started the Tudor dynasty and started to centralize tax collection and started the Star Chamber Court, which is going to be something that, is going to be infamous later on. But what he's trying to do is to reduce the clout of the nobility. All right. So Henry Tudor, and this is actually, I think this is like the last time that a king of England was slain in battle. Richard, the last planagenic king of England, was slain here in 1485. And so, as far as that sort of thing, Henry VII wins the War of the Roses and starts to centralize the administration. Now, in France, you've got the situation where France is like the largest country in Europe, but the vassals are very, very powerful. So the Burgundians, and essentially, in the Burgundian Wars, the French monarchy subdued these powerful Burgundians who were really kind of doing their own thing. Like during the 100 Years' War, the Burgundians switched sides a couple times. And then in Spain, you've got Ferdinand and Isabella, and they're trying to unify their kingdoms. So you have the Reconquista, which was finished in 91, but the 1490s really. And then they sent Columbus on his exploration. And then we have this striving for religious unity in the Inquisition. So when you think about it, like Henry VIII, Henry VII's son, was saying that, hey, we want to start the Church of England, and everybody's coming with me. Okay, so this whole idea of religious uniformity, and Ferdinand and Isabella, they kicked out the Muslim and Jewish populations. And so looking here, now this is a very old slide, but, as I was saying there, now Ferdinand and Isabella had completed the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula and put together the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile. Now you can see here at the time, oh, is anybody, okay, thanks for letting me know. Is anybody else having a problem hearing my voice? Okay, well, there we go. All right, hear him clear. There we go, Samantha. All right. So as far as that, which today, we got Catalonia, which is kind of an outlier here. All right. So as far as that goes, the Spanish Inquisition, nobody was expecting that, right? And remember that this was, a lot of times people want to, blame the Catholic Church or something like that, but it's really Ferdinand and Isabella are enabling the Catholic Church. The church couldn't execute people without a blessing from the state. And so as far as that goes, they're trying to combat heresy. And here is the seal of the Inquisition, Psalm 73, where it says here, "For lo, they that are far from thee shall perish. thou hast destroyed all them that go a whoring from thee. And that's the whole idea of the Inquisition, that all of these people that are, going and whoring from God or whatever they're doing, that's not going to happen anymore. All right, no more of these heretics. And torture. Now, this is something that also is kind of a feature of the Middle Ages, that, in modern times, we don't really see evidence that is gathered by torture to be admissible. Whereas, if you want to know if somebody's telling the truth in the Middle Ages, you torture it out of them. And so torture was a way that they would get people to confess that they were heretics. And so you have this chair. It looks like they'd sit you on this chair with like nails on it, and oh my goodness. And then of course the rack, where you're just stretched out, and they just keep twisting and twisting until, yeah, that's pretty much, there you go. And so there's somebody like, haha, I'm going to pretend I'm on the rack. No, it is not nice to torture. That is absolutely right, Liam. And the kitten Inquisition, I thought that was kind of funny when I saw that picture there. There's that kitten on the rack. And there is an auto de fe. If y'all read Candide this year, then you will see an auto de fe, which is an act of faith. That's where they are burning a whole bunch of heretics. And, so it gets pretty lit over there. So as far as that goes, just a little introduction to the new monarchs. As I said, I need to finish that lecture. There's some stuff I need to do on that. But as far as that goes, who were the Dominicans? Okay, so Liam's asking, who were the Dominicans? The Dominicans were a holy order. So, you've got like the Jesuits, the Dominicans, the Franciscans. The Dominicans were a holy order, and they were largely in charge of carrying out the Spanish Inquisition. Are these criminal punishments? Yes. Okay, and this is something that we need to understand, that it's really not until the Enlightenment that Europe starts to embrace the idea of religious toleration. And, it's not until the Peace of Westphalia at the end of the Peace of Westphalia at the end of the 30 Years' War that people start to think, you know what, maybe freedom of private worship was not so bad of a thing. That is correct, Liam. Hadrian's Wall is outside of the scope of this course. All right. So as far as that goes, let's see, and what were we talking about before we got to Hadrian's Wall? Yeah, so the Dominicans. Now, but this, to be a heretic or to be an infidel. Now, remember, an infidel is someone who is, it's called, unfaithful, without faith. Fidelis is faith, just like Marines say semper fi, semper fidelis. So an infidel is someone who is not of the faith. A heretic is someone who was of the faith and no longer is. Okay. That is a great question, because the Spanish rulers were really not some of the most tolerant. In fact, you've got like Ferdinand and Isabella, then you've got Charles V and Philip II, all devout Catholics who were, pretty much repping Catholicism all the way. So I don't think that I can think, like when you think of the Enlightened, you'll get to the Enlightened absolutists later on and you'll see that. But yeah, toleration really doesn't become a thing in Europe until the Enlightenment. So understand, yeah, these heretics, they are being executed for civil crimes, that it's like it's a violation of canon law, but they're also in violation of civil law, which required them to be Catholic. Okay. Did the Renaissance influence Russia at the time? I tell you what, I was joking with somebody that there's one guy that his ancestry is German, but they were Germans that lived in modern day Poland. And so one of his students jokes with him that he's Polish, and it makes him upset. And I saw that like the president of Poland came to the United States, and I tagged the teacher and his student. And I was like, yeah, I need to do a video sometime on the Polish Renaissance, but I don't think there was a Polish Renaissance. So yeah, the Russian Renaissance, if it happened, it's not on the test. But really, Russia at that time, and we need to appreciate, like, how far away Russia is at this time. And I think that's something that's worth discussing, is that, this was not a time where there was a lot of communication between Eastern and Western Europe, and then the whole idea of Europe. So Russia is so far away from any of this at that time. And this is before Peter the Great oriented Russia toward the West. Okay, so when you get to Peter the Great saying, look, Russia's future is going to be as a European country, which even today, though, Russia is that even today, Russia is, kind of Europe, but kind of its own thing. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that the Renaissance had a great effect on Russia. Now, the other thing is that the Romans, were never in Russia. So part of the charm here in Italy is that it was the Romans. All right. So as far as that goes, we're done answering that. Now, India and China interact with Europe at this time. Now, at the time, basically to trade. All right. So the age of exploration is about opening up trade routes into India and China. So, that's really the extent of the interaction is a trade relation, which, because of the age of exploration, is now much more accessible. Okay. So there's now a more direct trading relationship between Europe and India and China than there was before, when basically Europe got Eastern goods from, through Constantinople, where people had gone on the Silk Road. So this is the first time where like Europe and India have communicated and interacted on a direct basis. All right. So on the okay. So Liam, on the DBQs with a two-part. Okay. Now one thing about the DBQs, with the redesigned exam, the DBQs do tend to be more like one task oriented. Okay. So now I wouldn't say that there will never be a two-task prompt, but what they've done, the Renaissance Education DBQ, while I really enjoy it and I like that one too, so my students are going to do it. It's one of those things that they've watered down the exam significantly since then. And so, yes, I would expect that, if you look at the DBQs since the redesign, they've all been one task prompts. So that's a really good question, Liam, is you're probably not going to run into a lot of two task prompts. So that was a good question. What caused Spain? Now, Spain basically got there first, Joseph. I would say that Spain and Portugal, they got there first. And then, of course, at the end of the day, it's really France and Britain and the Netherlands who, become more powerful. All right. So when did Russia start their westward expansion? Peter the Great. Peter the Great, very important ruler in European history, and probably my favorite person in European history is Peter the Great. I've got like raps about Peter the Great. I did it back when the Ice Bucket Challenge was a thing several years ago. I, dressed up as Peter the Great and did a warm water challenge. But the video's on YouTube if y'all want to see it. So yeah, Peter the Great is really the person who, the ruler that oriented Russia toward the West. Let's see, Angie, I'm not sure exactly what you are talking about there. Okay, so a little bit confused about that. All right, their eastward expansion, probably around the same time, Liam. But the thing is, these are questions that are really kind of going beyond what we're going to see on the exam. But the other thing, Liam, the nice thing about that is these are all things you can Google as well. Remember, I'm here to help you prepare for the AP European History exam. But remember, we're never done learning, so keep that going. The conflict. Are you talking about the 100 Years' War, Angie? Now, the 100 Years' War is technically not within the scope of the AP European History exam, even though we may start off talking about the 100 Years' War. It's not something you're going to probably run into on the exam. So definitely keep that in mind. All right. So as far as that, do we have any other questions? Because otherwise, we'll wrap up pretty soon. And okay, actually, and this is one of those things, Andres, is that we want to keep in mind that this is a survey level course. We're really just kind of scratching the surface. But there was one brief period where Portugal was actually part of Spain, but then it wasn't again. Okay. So the thing is that Ferdinand and Isabella, what they do when they get married, the writing clinic, I've got a session tomorrow on the writing clinic. Thanks for asking about that. So yeah, so for anybody who bought in at the at the general or the VIP level, yeah, I've got a session tomorrow evening for that. All right. So did Spain never take? Yeah, but they did it, but it's not so much conquest. Remember that Aragon and Castile. Now, when you read Thomas More's Utopia, for example, he talks about some sailors from Castile. So even at that time, like during the Renaissance, they weren't referring to them. They weren't referring to Spain. They were referring to Castile, because you had, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile who were married. So it's not like there are wars going on, between the Christian kingdoms of the Iberian Peninsula, as much as, you just had this marriage that created this very large country. But Portugal, yeah, for a bit it was absorbed into Spain, and I'm not sure about that, but it really is not, it's not really relevant to the exam. All right, a good DBF. All right, now do we mean a DBQ? I have a video on the AP Euro DBQ that's on my YouTube channel, so be sure to take a look at that. All right. Industrial Revolution Fig, we are way early for that. Way early. All right. So not going to answer that one right now because we're way early. Now, as far as that goes, the Spanish Armada trying to attack England, there are two things going on there. Now, first of all, you've got Philip II had been married to Bloody Mary. And so Philip II had been married to Bloody Mary. And then he wanted to marry Elizabeth II. Elizabeth II was like, nope. And then you've got the Catholic Protestant thing. Remember, Philip II was a huge proponent of Catholicism, and Elizabeth I said that, no, that England is going to be a Protestant country. And so England's going to be a Protestant country, and therefore, yeah, basically that, so you've got the religious element of that as well. Okay, so with that, make sure y'all join the Fiveable Facebook group if y'all haven't already, because there are going to be some things that we're going to be doing from that group that are not going to be available to other people. I haven't really done online cahoots before, but yeah, we can. I can give y'all another. Link here, and this is a way if y'all want to go ahead and see my new lecture on Mannerism. Go ahead and check that out. So that is the Fiveable group. So, or you can just type in AP Euro students, but facebook.com/groups/AP Euro students. And that's going to be a great way to stay in the loop and get some updates that other people, either won't get at all or they won't get as quickly as you get them. So yeah, definitely make sure to, all right, Alejandro is coming into the group. Awesome. Be sure to answer the questions so we know, where you are. Okay, awesome, Joseph, we got you. Alejandro is going to answer his questions, and then we're going to get him all in the group as well. Okay, so thank y'all very much, ladies and gentlemen. Instagram groups, is that a thing? I don't know. Okay, but I'm at Tom Ritchie on Instagram, so feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter personally at Tom Ritchie. That's another way to make sure that you are keeping up with me. And also, while you're following people, think Fiveable. Okay, so think Fiveable. And that keeps you in contact with all the things that Fiveable is doing. Okay, so as far as that goes, yeah, Instagram groups. That's a new one. Even though I guess people have their like group chats on Instagram, and maybe somebody was talking about that. So can you DM me questions? Probably not. But in the Fiveable Facebook group, you could ask questions that may be answered by me or by somebody else in the group. So that's something I check the group once in a while to see what's going on there. So, that's something. But yeah, unless I follow you back, I probably won't answer a DM. But, people are like, well, who do you follow back? It's people who support my work and all that kind of stuff. But yes, thank y'all. And we'll be doing this every week. So feel free to drop in anytime. Thank y'all for coming. Those of you who are Miss Marino students, please say hello. And I tell you, she's awesome. So thanks again. Yes. And y'all, it is, there's some more stuff about the writing clinic. Feel free to email me about that, and I'll, share some more information about that. But right now I'm kind of in my capacity with Fiveable. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And it is always a pleasure. And remember, this year is Fiveable.